What Makes a Great Book, the companion documentary to The Great American Read, is made possible in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a grant from Anne Ray Foundation, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Meredith Vieira, host of The Great American Read. Think of your favorite book, the one you just can't put down, that you want to read over and over again. What draws you in? Maybe it's an enticing concept, a riveting plot, a character that leaps off the page. Maybe it's all of those things and more. Join us as we ask the question, what makes a great book?
What makes a great book? Well, of course, many things make a great book.
What makes a great book is integrity and honesty. Honest on the page, clear with your intentions, knowing what you want as an author to just give forth to the reader and not wavering in that.
I think a great book is probably different for everybody. For me, a book that not only entertains me and makes me want to keep reading it, that's not enough for me. I want the book to make me think, make me feel. If it can make me laugh and cry, that's great. But most of all, I am always looking for the book that I feel I will remember 20 years from now and that I feel maybe around 100 years from now, a book that has a real impact.
A great book is one that holds my interest and that has characters that I want to know. You know, characters that I'd like to meet.
What makes a great book is when everything is serving the story. So when technique serves the story and not the story serves the technique.
For me, it's characters that are contradictory, compelling, and making decisions that I either completely relate to or couldn't possibly relate to.
You know, sometimes you can read a book and you think, especially nowadays, people will say, well, this book really speaks to this moment. Well, that's fine, that's good, and that book will probably be widely read, at least for the next year or two, or maybe even 10. But will that book be read in 50 years? And that's often a question that we at the New York Times ask ourselves when we consider sort of what makes a great book or what makes a best book of the year.
So The Chronicles of Narnia is not only a great book, I would say one of the best series ever written. When I read this series, I felt like it was not a children's book and I had entered into a new world of literature that I never wanted to leave.
One of the things that makes a great book is the ability to try to imagine what it might be like to reach readers beyond the time frame and beyond the geographical location or moment that they're writing in.
My favorite book series is the Old Kingdom Cycle by Garth Nix. It has wonderful elements of high fantasy, but also has some elements of steampunk in it because they're two separate worlds in the novel, one of which is roughly analogous to early 20th century England, and the other is high fantasy and in no way relates to anything in the world that we inhabit.
A great book is a book that lots of people recognize as great. Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte is a great example of this. It's a very unconventional book, an unusual book, and yet, as soon as it was published, it reached thousands and thousands of readers. It became a bestseller. It was well-reviewed. Some people found it controversial, but they recognized its talent. It's never been out of print.
Moby Dick is a great book simply because I think that it captures in a lot of ways what American culture is, which is like this arrogance of what happens when you become so obsessed with something that you're willing to go down with the ship, as it were. Ahab is so obsessed with this whale that he's willing to die in pursuit of killing the whale. And it sort of, in a lot of ways, begins to make me challenge, like, am I really that obsessed with anything? Am I willing to go down with the ship? And that lets me know what's important and what's not.
In the books that we love to read, we develop empathy. And I think Charlotte's Web is one of the greatest books to look at how children develop empathy and caring for the world around them.
I guess if you're thinking about the components, the ingredients for a great book, You need plot, you need character, and you need style. You need a little pizzazz. And I think that really, if you take any great book that you love, it has to have at least 2 out of the 3. If it's got plot and character and style, then you know you're in the hands of someone who really knows what they're doing.
A great book is really one that makes you feel like you know the people in it. Not that you recognize them, not that they're familiar, but that you feel personally connected to them and they come alive for you, maybe even more alive than people you actually know.
I've always been drawn to brave, strong, but kind of solitary characters. And especially as a young girl, I had many. My first one that I remember is Harriet the Spy. She was out there spying on people, but doing her own thing. I loved her. And then as I got older, Anne Shirley from Anne of Green Gables, Jo Marsh from Little Women, again, Elizabeth Bennet, they all had a special place in my life.
Asking who is somebody's favorite literary character is like asking a mother who is your favorite child. I think different ones come to you at different points in your life and have different meanings.
In The Book Thief, which happens to be, I think, one of the great American Read books, Liesl was probably my favorite character because she had a great love for books. And there was one scene in the book and in the movie, if I thought I could find it, I would look it up. And to this day, when I think about that scene, I really get goosebumps, literally. And it's when she's in the library and is running her hands along the spines of the book, and she makes some comment. There's my goosebumps, I can feel them.
My favorite character is Greg from Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I like him because he's funny, and he's funny with his family and whatever's going on with them.
Probably my favorite literary character is Elizabeth Bennet from Pride and Prejudice. She's so brave. I know it doesn't seem like that this is such a brave thing, but she gets asked to, in marriage, to marry Mr. Collins, and she says no. And for her situation, she doesn't know what's going to happen. She doesn't know where her life is going to lead her, and it's possibly that she's going to be destitute if she doesn't marry him, but she doesn't. I think that's very brave, and she's also very witty. I think she's a lot of fun to read.
Structure is structure. Stories have a beginning, they have a middle, they have an end. Some stuff happens in between. There's some cause and effect. At the end, they win, they lose, they draw, whatever. It's like sports. But if I'm going to use that example, like sports, great stories are about the people that are doing them. You take The Godfather, for example. One of the things that makes The Godfather so compelling is you have a character that has been raised in the mafia. You have a character who is surrounded by things that none of us are really that much surrounded by, and yet all of his decisions seem like ones that we could see ourselves making. He chooses to go off and fight for the war instead of being in the family business. Well, most of us are not making that type of decision, but we do understand what it's like to rebel from our parents in some way.
I think my favorite literary character is Randolph Thor from the Wheel of Time series. I would say that's the series of books that really got me started into reading, if anything. My brother gave me one of the first books in the series, and I read it and fell in love with it when I was in high school. I wasn't really a big reader until then, but I really identified with this character. He was kind of thrown into situations that he wasn't used to. He really spoke to me as, an interesting person. Just he's accepting these things as they come and just fulfilled these big duties that he didn't think that he'd ever really get a chance to do, but he got a chance to get away from home, try new things, and I really identify with that.
One of my favorite literary characters is Daisy Buchanan, because she's a central character in The Great Gatsby, but most people don't realize that she's the driving force behind the entirety of the novel. Everything that Jay Gatsby does on Long Island is to impress and get reacquainted with Daisy Buchanan. And as a main character that drives the driving force of the novel, she's a real unknown. We don't know anything about her inner thoughts or desires or anything, but she is the reason why The Great Gatsby, which is one of the greatest novels of American literature, is. She just is why everything happens in the book.
There's many elements to a great book, but for me, the most important one is character development. Do I get to know these characters? Do I care about them? Are their lives interesting to me? Honestly, plot, setting, they all come so much farther down than character development.
With Alice in Wonderland, you get these crazy characters. I was reading Alice in Wonderland to my 5-year-old the other day, and he was just laughing hysterically because it's so crazy and the names are so much fun.
Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. One of the great things that he did was he had great names for his characters, and that sounds like such a minor point, but writers really think about the names of their characters. And so again, Hungry Joe, you remember that, you remember Usari, and you remember these names, and he created characters that people could relate to, people could kind of envision them in their minds, and that stays.
I'm currently reading a James Lee Burke book, which has the main character is named Robichaux. And I love Robichaux, although in real life we probably wouldn't get along at all, but he's a great character.
A good plot makes you want to keep turning the pages. Like, you don't want to check what time it is. And when you do look at the time, it's like hours later and you're like, wait, and you're not even upset about it. And you still want to read more.
Plot is a series of interconnected events that impact the creation of a story and the unfolding of a story about which characters have to make decisions.
I think the process of developing a storyline for authors, it varies. I think the beginning of that process always begins with having a solid origin story and also working into the space of complete vulnerability.
You have to have a good plot, but a lot of people like something that grabs your interest and has a quick build. But I like something that you have to really get into, something that has a slow build.
To me, the elements of a great book are a book that offers you a new perspective, something that you've never. A situation you've never found yourself in, or someone you've never met, just to give you that opportunity to step into their life for a second, think about how you might handle that situation or solve this problem. It's that opportunity that we all have the same experiences as in life, and it's like armchair travel. It just gives you that chance to try it on for size and hopefully learn something and grow in the process.
Good writing is born, and sincere writing is born when writers give themselves the space to explore in this kind of painstakingly slow and desultory and almost reckless fashion.
For me, the elements of a great book include great writing to begin with. I really love a book where the language flows and creates pictures.
I think an author's style is unique when we can see bits of them in their writing. When they take time to really develop the character and we see their thoughts and feelings, they take time to develop the setting so that we're really in that situation.
One that I really recently just finished, because I read a lot, was called No Exit by Taylor Adams. Lately I've been on kind of a psychological thriller kick of books, and that book, probably more than any that I remember in the last few years, was really hard to put down. The best suspense probably that I've ever read.
When you start, you have an introduction. Some people call it an exposition, where the characters are introduced. The action starts you sort of get an idea of what the story is going to be about, and then the action begins to rise until it gets to a climactic point, and you're going, here we are, and then it happens, and then there's, a lot of people call that point the denouement, and then the action starts to fall, and you have some kind of conclusion.
So a wonderful book that really focuses on plot is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. It has this time-traveling quality where suddenly you're the 1900s, and I love that quality. Anytime a story can pull you in and take you to a whole nother century, it's the perfect book.
I think a great book is a storytelling experience. It's something that pulls you in deep and won't let you out until the very end.
My favorite book is Junie B. Jones. I like Junie B. Jones because it has a lot of things you can learn.
One of my favorite book series is the books by Louise Penny that involve an inspector, and it takes place in a little village, and I love the way she writes, and each book is a gem. It's a lovely series.
I like the book Diary of a Wimpy Kid. He's just funny.
I have read all of the books in the series of unfortunate events by Lemony Snicket, which is the pen name for Daniel Handler.
I have read all of the books that Kathy Lamb has written, and that's Kathy with a C. And I'm a book nerd. That's no excuse. And our book club does all of her books. And we actually have Skyped with her at one of our book club meetings, and it was great.
I've read all of Lauren Groff's books. She's written only a couple books, but she's really blown up in the last couple of years. She wrote Fates and Furies, and that really blew up for especially for my family. I've given that book away so many times. But I've read some of her older stuff, and I've really seen how she's grown. Her most recent book, called Florida, is a collection of short stories, and you can just tell how much better she's gotten over the years. And I'm really excited for her just to bring out more stuff. I'm constantly checking to see if she's really seen anything new. But it's a book that I can always give away. She's an author I can always trust that I'm always going to be able to give to someone else to enjoy.
If I had to pick a favorite book series, I could always fall back on The Lord of the Rings. You know, when you're a teenager, the chance to explore Middle-earth and meet elves and dwarves and save the world. That just really sticks with you. Now that I'm a little bit older, the series that comes to mind is the Millennium Trilogy by Stieg Larsson. So think the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. It's very gritty, very dark, but there's still that element of righting wrongs and saving the world, and there's something about that still really sticks with me.
It's those books that like have you under the covers at night with like a flashlight, reading, that just draw you in. Like at the end of every single page, there's something that makes you say like, I need to know.
Well, the book that I'm reading right now is called City of Grudges by Rick Outzen. He's actually a local author, and it's really interesting because it's a fictional piece about Pensacola and some of the old histories and kind of some of the city grudges that, who knows, are they true? Could they? It's a little spicy, so it's very interesting to kind of wonder if it really is fiction.
I think the book that I just could not stop reading, I think I read it in one sitting, was Station 11 by Mandel St. John. This weird apocalyptic kind of story that doesn't involve zombies in any way, but it's this whole group of people just trying to survive after this weird pandemic. And the way the plot just intertwines, they give pieces of information that you really don't know how they're going to play together, but suddenly everything winds together at the very end to just, I still get tingles just thinking about it. Just everything of how the plot and the setting especially, it's this post-apocalyptic world, and these people are just kind of going along living their lives, but these little threads from different people across the country that get connected at the very end, suddenly you think, oh, there's more to the story than the book just ends. I've reread it just a couple times, and I don't normally do that, but it just kept me going all the way through.
I appreciate people with much more twisty-turny plots, Agatha Christie, Stephen King, I know are on the list, people who are true experts at plot. That's the point of a plot, it's not to have everything happen and to, throw things in a character's path, but just to make sure that whatever does happen, that the reader actually cares by the end of it.
In my opinion, style in literature is how an author uses words to his best advantage.
I think my favorite writing style from an author is something that's quick and choppy. I love when they give you just enough information to figure out the story and you have to build all the clues around you. They're not giving you too much. They really make you work for the story, make you work for all the clues and all the information in the story.
Writing style is where people find a way to express their worldview in words. You can have a beautiful style, but it won't feel like a great style unless it gives you a sense of a person behind it who couldn't express themselves any other way.
I think each author has his or her own voice, own way of saying things, and one is not necessarily better or worse than the other. I mean, I do think style matters, But for example, when I think of Hemingway and I think of Faulkner, they couldn't be more different.
An author that I've read, if not all, most of the books, is Agatha Christie. I started reading her when I was a kid, and I still go back to her when I'm sort of in between books. I love her characters, her voice, her settings, and I love that suspense.
Written language is a particularly strong medium for telling stories, in part because it's so intimate.
That's when you can't help but fold down the page or break out a pen or sort of take notes and or go back up a paragraph and say, oh God, wait, I need that again.
You think about great stories, and it's not always the most beautiful, most poetic words that we end up remembering for dialogue. It's often words that are characters revealing themselves in a moment, and that means something. It is powerful.
Ships at a distance have every man's wish on board. That's beautiful. It's beautiful already. For some, they come in with the tide. For others, they sail forever on the horizon, never out of sight, never landing until the watcher turns his eyes away in resignation, his dreams mocked to death by time. That is the life of men.
The strength of words is that they sort of expand within us as we read them, and we also take them in or take them on to try them on, and that changes our consciousness, and that's very powerful. You literally think things you couldn't have thunk before.
In To Kill a Mockingbird, through Scout's eyes, we learned that the world is not what we think it is. It's this way. And so she does that through plot, but it's also through style, because style is the choice of words, the cadence of the sentence, how she rearranges it. And of course, it's what does she leave out? What does she put in? What is she telling us as the author that she wants us to know at this very moment?
I grew up in the South. As a young adult college student, I became extremely concerned about and interested in racial issues. So the racial aspect of that was real important to me. And yet it was a story, a relatively simple story with a heroic character. So I think all of that kept me reading, but it also keeps me loving that one over the years.
The Coldest Winter Ever by Sister Souljah is a perfect book that resonates style and just energy. The whole book is going through this young woman's life as she's like changing, and quite honestly, it's a coming of age story. And I love the style of her writing and just the grit of it. That's like the word that comes to mind. It's just like a gritty, real novel. And her voice, I think, is actually like not acknowledged as much. Like more people need to know about her work.
Jane Austen is considered a master or mistress of style. And the first line of her novel, Pride and Prejudice, is a great illustration of why her style is so beloved. It goes like this. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. There's a lot we could say about that sentence, which is one of the things that makes Jane Austen a great stylist. Her language, though simple, is rich. But the two features of her style that show up the most in the first sentence of Pride and Prejudice are classical balance on the one hand and a sly, sarcastic sense of humor and fun on the other.
You know, it almost doesn't matter if the story holds up or if it hangs together as a whole, so much as that it's beautifully written or that it does something interesting or new with language. And I think that's probably more of a writerly concern than a reader's concern, but that's something that many people consider to be fundamental to what makes a great book.
We take for granted the fact that when you watch any sports game, there's people talking, giving you constant language of what's happening. Like, did you see that 360 dunk? And it's like, wait, that was what that was? Oh, okay. There's not that much for literature that works in that way. Like this sort of analysis, this fun language that you got. Oh, did you see the simile he did on page 75? You're like, what, that was simile? Oh, I didn't see that. I didn't even know what simile was. And it's like, being able to create that sort of fun around it, I think it will make people like want to read more. It's like, oh, this is for me as a reader, not just for me as a writer.
I think people read for very different reasons. Some people read to challenge themselves. Some people read because they want to be comforted. Some people read to relax. Other people read to learn something new. And I think the reasons why we read, of course, then will affect what we get out of a book, whether we like it or not, whether it delivers on that need.
The end of reading a really great book, there's almost this like emptiness that you feel. It's like a book hangover, kind of, where like you just like you don't want to read anything else for a little bit because you just want to sit inside of that experience that you just felt with that book.
Every book is different, I think. For some books, it's the characters. For another book, it might be the fast-moving plot. And for another book, it may be that setting that captures everyone's imagination and makes us long to be there. I think it all just depends on the book, what makes a book a great book.
Great books can have a profound impact on our lives and stay with us for years after we turn the last page. And aren't we lucky that they do? I'm Meredith Vieira. Thanks for watching.
What Makes a Great Book, the companion documentary to The Great American Read, was made possible in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a grant from Anne Ray Foundation, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.